The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Buss family is selling their portion of the Lakers to Dodgers owner Mark Walter and the Guggenheim Group for $10 billion.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast.
This is something that has been, I guess, discussed, what the exit strategy for the Buss family would be. And
at some point, if nothing else, if not this year, this month, this day, the idea that at some point, this is something we'll talk about in this show and over the course of a full-length show coming up later, just the idea that the Buss family remaining the principal owners of this team in 2025 in the landscape of modern sports team ownership was simply not tenable anymore.
Yeah, it was getting a lot harder, to say the very least. Mark Walter already owned, I believe, 20% of the team and had, as I mentioned, right of first refusal to purchase the rest should the Buss family decide to put their stake up. I believe it was 66% of the team. And that is what happened on Wednesday. The deal is not yet finalized, as is being reported. The Athletic is actually reporting that the sale could reach as much as $12 billion in value. But given how the line of succession here was fairly well understood and fairly well known, you would expect that the vast majority of this is settled. Otherwise, the news wouldn't be getting out. So the Buss family selling to to Mark Walter, owner of the Dodgers. Should mention that if you don't, if you missed that part. This is a massive development, not just for the Lakers, obviously, but across the NBA.
This is huge. I mean, the Lakers, this set a record, whether this ends up $10 billion, $12 billion. This was the highest sale of any North American, U.S., however you want to phrase it, sports team in history. Like, this is as big of a sale as we've ever seen. And I imagine unless the Yankees or the Cowboys go on sale anytime soon, this is a record that is going to hold, because those are the only two teams in sports that you could even picture an ownership change happening, because teams like the Warriors, the Celtics, they've all gone through recent ownership changes, and those are not about to change anytime soon. It's a record that it's going to hold for a while. There are massive implications from this sale, whether you're talking about culturally within the team, whether you're talking about different ways that the money will, I think we both feel, positively affect this team moving forward. Some of the things that the Buss family, whether you think they were unwilling, unable, a little bit of both, to dedicate towards this team financially, that is not going to be a problem with Mark Walter and the Guggenheim money that he has, and the stakes that he has, and all these different teams, and just the type of wealth that we are now talking about at the head, that's now financing the Lakers. This is a massive sea change. I mean, to put this in perspective, the Buss family has owned this team since 1979. Like, Dr. Buss bought this team heading into Magic Johnson's rookie season.
Pretty solid return on that initial $67 million investment. That wasn't even just for the Lakers, which in and of itself, to go from 67 million to 10 to 12 billion would be again a nice return. That also included the Kings, the Forum, and a ranch. So again, solid purchase for the Buss family there. Time to hire a good capital gains attorney. But I think, the big question here is what.
Not just have Linda do it.
Maybe. You could. The big question here, though, is how this affects the Lakers and how they're going to operate, because Jeannie Buss is going to continue to be the governor of the team going forward. How long that lasts is something perhaps we'll talk about in tonight's show. The Mark Cuban example in Dallas could be a pretty good template here. So we'll hold that for a second. But for the time being, Jeannie Buss is going to remain the governor of the team and all this. And the Lakers obviously can't suddenly just start handing out gigantic Shohei-style deferred contracts and spending $500 million and all this, because there are rules about how the NBA operates. But I think there are two places that my reaction initially was, you'll see a huge difference. The first is infrastructure, where the Lakers, while they have historically spent on payroll, I don't think they've really, they always spend a lot of money on players, maybe not as much as you want, whatever, but historically they've spent a lot there. They have not spent money as much as you would think a team like the Lakers would in other places, should. Forget the would, should. Assistant coaches, front office, training staff, scouting, all these other things are things that the Lakers have traditionally not spent as much money on. They have had small brain trusts and things like that. Some of that is culture, but the culture can be impacted, whether consciously or unconsciously, by either not wanting to or not being able to spend certain amounts of money. So you can justify, well, we just like a small culture, but really you're at least somewhat affected by your finances. And the second is going to be the way the team is run. Like, how the Dodgers have a way of doing things. Andrew Friedman, for example, is technically not the GM of that team. He's like the president of whatever, and there's a different guy who's a GM, and they have this collaborative structure and architecture that I think that will eventually be replicated with the Lakers, whether that includes Rob Pelinka in the short or long term. Short term, yes. Long term remains to be seen. But it is going to be different. The days 5 years from now, I'll say this, the Lakers will not have like a 3-person basketball ops department.
Well, this is something I will make this prediction right now because I feel confident saying it. If Rob Pelinka is not willing moving forward to be more of a collaborator with more people around him that, if they are not at his true equal level, are pretty close, he will not be long for this job. I'm willing to make that prediction right now.
So,
because frankly, there's always been, I think, an accurate perception that if the Lakers wanted to do better than Rob Pelinka, they could. I'm not saying that he's the worst exec in the league. I'm not saying that he's the worst person running basketball ops in the NBA, but we've both been pretty candid in our opinion that Jeannie Buss could do better than Rob Pelinka.
Yeah.
A lot of ways should do better, or at the very least should have more people around Rob Pelinka with an actual voice. And Rob has been very successful at continually consolidating and shielding his power. I would be stunned if that remains a constant moving forward.
Yeah, I just, you talk about this notion of, can they do better? It's not that Pelinka's the worst, it's can you do better? And the Dodgers, I think the ethic of the Dodgers now is we have the best of whatever. Whoever the best person is for job A, B, and C, we got that guy. You quibble with it, do you think Bruce Bochy is a better manager than Dave Roberts? Whatever it might be, but like Andrew Friedman was the best at what he did when he was in Tampa. The Dodgers took him. They have collected different players different executives to fill in this brain trust around Friedman. Guys come in and out of the front office generally because they're too talented to stay in a lower level position with the Dodgers. But I feel like that sort of thing is going to become much more common, where you see the Lakers improving on their infrastructure by going and finding the people perceived to be the best in the NBA world. It's not going to happen right away, and they're going to make mistakes, and they'll hire the wrong guy sometimes for this or that or whatever.
Look, the Dodgers ownership and Andrew Friedman, they've made mistakes before.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's not going to, again, it's not going to operate.
Two words for you, glass and now.
It's not working out well. It's one of these things where, you know, the way it looks won't look like the Dodgers, because the Dodgers have the luxury of being able to spend both creatively and infinitely. And the Lakers just obviously the NBA just offers far less optionality in both of those categories. You are limited.
Although it should be noted, and again, we're going to get into more of this in a full-length show later tonight. There are more restrictions in the way you can spend, more obstacles because of the CBA and it being a cap league as opposed to baseball. But there may be more of a willingness to go further into tax thresholds to pay more money.
I'm not saying,
and that does matter. It matters a lot.
There could be seasons in which they're willing to spend the extra, you know, where you make this trade and it's going to cost you an extra 14 or 15, 17, 22, 25 million or whatever. I'm just saying, like, there are certain things that you can't change the second apron rules just because you're rich. You can't defer money like they have for Shohei. Just because, but I will say it's time for them to lift these oppressive second apron rules that are keeping my man Mark Walter down. I'm tired of living under this regime. I don't think it's fair.
Viva la Walter.
But I do think what you'll have is just a change in style, a pretty drastic change in style. And look, the track record, we'll see if it translates, but the track record for the Guggenheim folks and Mark Walter in baseball is strong.
Yes,
very, very strong. And if nothing, it just puts the Lakers on significantly better financial footing going forward at a time, like you say, when the family ownership model, the individual ownership model, is getting harder and harder to sustain unless you are a Steve Ballmer, one of these types guys.
You cannot compete anymore as billionaires partially on paper, which is the way the Lakers have been. You know, I mean, the Buss family, they are clearly rich people. Yes. We're not trying to pretend otherwise, but there can even be levels to being a billionaire. And the Buss family, they're just not the right type of billionaires anymore.
Yeah, it's a burden I would like to have placed on me once, somebody calling me the wrong kind of billionaire. But we'll see.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Baltimore Ravens, they get him. They signed Jaire Alexander.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
The Ravens are clear. They are clear Super Bowl favorites with this move. You add Jaire Alexander onto the squad, into the secondary. And the fact of the matter is, you look at the deal, you look at the actual contract that was signed here. He didn't break the bank. It was a deal for $4 million. It can go up to $6 million with incentives. That, to me, signals that Jaire Alexander wants to win. I talked about it literally on today's show this morning, where if Jaire wants to win, take a lesser contract for a year, play to win a Super Bowl, and then go somewhere else, or even maybe re-sign with the Ravens, who knows, on a bigger contract to get him one last huge payday, Baltimore would be the spot for him. he would absolutely be like, it'd be a perfect fit because he can play on a team to win that championship. And then he can also go and get the money. It's the best of both worlds. And I think Lamar reaching out to him was a big deal. Obviously, those two go way back. They reunite in Baltimore after their days at Louisville. I'm sure something that they have probably talked about a lot since they got drafted back in 2018. There's the viral clip of Jaire celebrating after Lamar got drafted. I essentially am talking a lot about my points on today's show. And look, that show lasted about 6 hours with Lamar's comments. And now we got the actual move happening. And, Cam's saying it right here. The Ravens replaced Brandon Stevens with Jaire Alexander. And you also replace Marcus Williams with Malachi Starks. That is 2 clear upgrades for you in your secondary. I have the highest expectations for this secondary. Jaire is an incredible player. Let's talk about Jaire, the player, a little bit. Let's get into who he is. Now, we know the injuries are a factor, right? Jaire has only played in 7 games in each of the last 2 seasons. But when he is on, he is on. He is a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's a guy that will force turnovers for you, but, he had his career year in 2022 with 5. He's not going to be the super high interception player. He hasn't been that most seasons in his 7 years in the league. He's only had 12 interceptions, but that's not necessarily what you're getting him for. You're getting him for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I love the versatility the Ravens can now throw out. Not that they couldn't before, but this truly, you can move Marlon inside to the slot. You can rotate guys in and out on the outside. We know Baltimore loves their 3 cornerback rotations on the outside with a slot guy. So you can either put Marlon in there, you can put Kyle Hamilton down in the slot, Malachi Starks can play in the slot. Like, you have so many players that can do that for you. And now you add a shutdown cornerback in Jaire, who, again, when he's healthy, he's still a top 10 corner in the league, in my opinion. He is still a top 10 corner in the league when he's healthy. Now, the thing is he has to stay healthy, but this is kind of what we talked about with DeAndre Hopkins, where when he's healthy, right, he's only been healthy in about one of the last 4 seasons, one of the last 3, if I remember correctly. But 3 of those years for DeAndre, he's been hurt, he's been in and out of lineups, but when he's healthy, he can still contribute to you. The difference with Jaire is he is still like in the smack dab of his prime here. I mean, Jaire, he's not old. He's not old. He's only 28. He's only 28 years old. So to me, this is a player that you can have for this season. He plays really well. I would reward him. Now, I don't know if the cap situation for Baltimore would be able to accommodate him and Marlon and, all the extensions that they're going to have to figure out. But I think that Jaire, because of the injuries, has been underrated. And I'm sure that's part of why he did take a deal for less money here. Right? It's a big conversation. It's a big conversation with the health. But here's the thing. It'd be different if Jaire were signing with Baltimore to be their number 1 cornerback. Because the thing is, Baltimore didn't need Jaire Alexander. They didn't need him to win a Super Bowl. But man, does he help their chances. Man, does he help them out. Man, I cannot believe this is real. And the fact that it was such a quick turnaround, I mean, Lamar must have known something, right? Lamar must have known something was going on there with Jaire. There's no Eric calls up Jaire at 4:30 yesterday. Hey, Jaire, you want to come play? Jaire says yes. He comes. Nah, something had to be happening, right? Something had to be happening. So, man, I tell you, this has been like for me 4 or 5 years in the making of me wanting Jaire on the Ravens for the fact that I thought he'd be such a good fit. This is like celebration maximum for me, and I'm glad that we can do it all here together on Locked On Ravens. I love these live shows because we can interact in the chat. It's awesome. And I forgot about this too. Iconic talking about replacing Arthur Millette with Chidobe Awuzie. Chidobe Awuzie is your 4th cornerback now, and you can do a lot with him too. Like all of that. Now you have that secondary. Let's just go over the secondary right now. Not even just the cornerback room, because we talked about those guys. Marlon Humphrey, Jaire Alexander, Nate Wiggins, Chidobe Awuzie, TJ Tampa, et cetera in that room. But then you also have Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks. You have a big 5, a starting 5 in basketball, let's call it here. A starting 5 of Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, Marlon Humphrey, Jaire Alexander, and Nate Wiggins. It's the new no-fly zone. It is the new no-fly zone. But again, everybody has to stay healthy. But this is also a big deal where, okay, what if Marlon has to miss a game or two? Or what if Nate Wiggins has to be on the sideline for a little bit? And of course, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. This is such important depth. It is such important depth for the Ravens because we've seen years that have been ruined by cornerback injuries. You can never have enough corners. And the Ravens are a team that, again, they wait things out, right? And I talk about this all the time. If you've been listening to me here on the show, I talk about this all the time, where they like to see markets develop. And they're never going to be a team, at least usually. I know 2022 when they signed Marcus Williams, Marvin Moses, et cetera, that was maybe the exception of the rule. But they usually never go and spend $100 million on, 5 free agents on day one. They like to keep the money. They like to be strategic with it, and they'd like to see how things develop here. If the Ravens had blown away all their money on the first couple of days of free agency, and then they wouldn't have had the opportunity to sign a Jaire potentially. And I know that the deal itself is so small in the grand scheme of things relative to what he could have made that, yeah, maybe they still could have snuck it in there. But, I cannot get this point across enough. I already was having the Ravens in that top tier upper echelon Super Bowl contender this year, right? The roster was already that good. Jaire pushes them to me. They're the Super Bowl favorite. I'm going to pick them to win the Super Bowl every single time now. And it's not just me. Oh, I'm a host of a Ravens show. I cover the Ravens. No, I'm objective with it, right? I'm objective. I didn't know if Baltimore in that roster was going to be able to beat Philly. I think they had a shot to. They definitely had a shot to, but it wasn't that clear cut to me. But with Philly losing some of their guys, they replenished it in some ways. I think Baltimore's roster is the best roster in football with Jaire being added. And yeah, Charlie's saying $6 million for Jaire is it's unbelievable. It is unreal how big of a steal this is. And that's the thing too. If they had signed him to a $20 million deal, they had to cut somebody or maybe let somebody go next offseason to do it. Yeah, we'd be having a different conversation, but it is such a no risk. I'm not even calling it low risk. It is no risk with Jaire and that talent. When you get him for that little, yes, the injury, and I saw someone, I can't find the comment, I apologize, but I saw some people talking about how for Jaire, yes, the talent is legitimate, but the injury concerns scare you. I don't blame you at all if you're on the injury train with Jaire. But it just, the money itself is so minuscule in the grand scheme of things that, at least for a player like Jaire's talent, that, at this point, it's over with for a lot of this league. And look, we see in the division, you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. You got DK Metcalf. Browns have receivers. You have to account for that. You're going to be going up against tough receivers for the whole year. You start off with a lot of tough games. They can start quickly with Jaire Alexander.
LSU walks off Arkansas. The Tigers are headed to the championship series.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I got to sit here and start and wax poetic for a quick second, y'all. I mean, when lifelong LSU fan, when my family moved to Baton Rouge, I was 7 years old. It was 1989, and LSU football stunk. They were in the midst of 6 straight losing seasons, and Skip was on the ascent with baseball. You all know the story, but that was the formative years of my life, and I love this baseball program. I know a lot of you are baseball fans. I know you love the pro. I get it. I just need you to understand, when I was a kid, our weekdays, you'd go to baseball practice, and Dad would pick us up, and then we go to the box and we watch the middle 3 and then go home and do homework. And we buy the programs for 25 cents and you get the lucky seat number. And I still got autographed bats with the Piccadilly logo on it from the 91 championship team. It's just, I love this team. Always have. And I just think about immediately all the walk-offs that we've been blessed to see. And here 10, 20, 30 years later, they still resonate emotionally. Todd Walker in 1993 to send LSU to the championship. Armando Rios firing his helmet in the air. Warren Morris in 1996. Brad Cressy scoring Ryan Terrio in 2000. I mean, we could go through the years. Tommy White 2 years ago, y'all. We will remember these forever. And now what we just watched to send LSU to the championship series it joins that list, man. It joins that list. Like I just listed Todd Walker and Warren Morris and Brad Cressy and Tommy White. I mean, y'all, I just listed 4 names that had walk-off wins in Omaha and now a 5th with Jared Jones. It's incredible when you're blessed to see these moments. And that's one that, y'all, I mean, I do this show. I sit here and I do this show and I have to make these graphics and everything. And I had to change it like 4 times in this game. I mean, it looked really bad initially when LSU couldn't hit battle sheets. And then Jake Brown comes off the bench and rips the 2 RBI single, and you're up 2-1. And then Chase Shores comes in looking like a Greek god. And you think this thing is done because here comes Ianson in the bullpen. And then in the 8th inning, it was just a brutal sequence where it all fell apart and you find yourself now down 3-2. And then Bear Jones ties it. And here you go again. You got a chance to walk it off. And then a disgusting sequence in the 9th where they score 2 runs and now you're down 5-3 and thinking, all right, well, it's over. Let's start gearing up for what Thursday is going to look like. And my goodness, LSU against Gibbler. And John Pearson leads off with an ugly strikeout, and you turn the lineup over, and Derek Curiel gets on base, does what he has done all year. I mean, he gets on base. I think they ruled it a double. Let me check. I don't know if it was a single and a throwing error. Let me see how they ruled it in the 9th. They ruled it a single and a throwing error for Curiel. And then Ethan Fry does a beautiful job drawing that walk, y'all. I mean, Ethan Fry's walk, he was laying off tough pitches from Gibbler. And then Stephen Milam walks. And all of a sudden, you're looking up, and there's 2 on, and you hit the ground ball. Forgive me. Curiel reached, Fry walked, and then Milam's up, and my God, Vaheva Aloy, as great a player as he is, he's going to relive that moment for the rest of his life. I mean, Milam rolls over one from the right side, and it was a brilliant job keeping Gibbler in there because it turned Milam around to the right side. He rolls over one. The game should be over, and the player of the year in the conference goes to third to get the lead runner. That doesn't even matter because you're up 2. Turn the double play. At least if you only get the lead runner, now you've got 1 run that's insignificant at third. You got the out at second, runner at first. They need an extra base hit to get that runner home from first. Vaheva Aloy just had a brain fart. And then Luis Hernandez ropes one, and the left fielder can't come up with it, hits him on the shoulder, misplays the ball, 2-run score. And then Bear Jones. My goodness. What a day. What a day. What a game. Awesome. Do me a favor. Please smash that like button if you would. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being with us here. Tigers are headed to the championship series. They'll take on Coastal Carolina. As much of a complete and total disappointment as that weather delay was, because it forced you to use Evans on Tuesday instead of what he should have pitched in this game, because you were able to win this game now and not use Anthony Ianson, you will be a monumental favorite over Coastal Carolina with respect to that team that's won 26 games. And we are going to talk about Morrison, and we're going to talk about Coastal as we get closer to it. But the bottom line is, whatever they have, it doesn't matter because you have Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson queued up on full rest now to go win you 2 baseball games. And my goodness, what a freaky, phenomenal, man. Absolutely phenomenal. We got a ton to talk about. Drop your comments. Thank you to everybody. Scott, LSU took 4 out of 5 from Arkansas this year. I mean, think about that. Arkansas was right there with Tennessee among the most talented teams in the country. And LSU beat them 4 out of 5 games. And the one that Arkansas got was a game where LSU led early and the bullpen faltered. But my God, they just owned that team this year. It was incredible.
The NBA playoffs are almost over. In fact, they could end this very evening. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action while you still have a chance. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals and assists. There's so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. You can place that first $5 bet on some NFL playoff dark horses. The Carolina Panthers sit at plus 240 to reach the postseason. The Bears plus 190 and the new-look Raiders plus 320. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
Oklahoma City is one win away from an NBA championship.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we head into Game 6, the Thunder are one win away from clinching their first NBA championship in team history. Where do you think this ranks in in terms of biggest Oklahoma sports moments ever?
Well, first off, Rylan, thank you so much for having me on such a momentous day.
I'm glad you could make it. I mean, who better than Joey Pods?
So, I think it would be one of the biggest moments. I mean, certainly in Oklahoma sports history. I mean, all you go to is, OU football, which is king in this state, but that obviously isn't a fan base that extends across the state like the Thunder does. So I think it would be one of the biggest sports moments, maybe the biggest sports moment. And even aside from sports, one of the biggest moments in Oklahoma City history. I mean, we haven't been a state for that long. We haven't been a city for that long. It's still the new frontier out here, Rylan, and the Thunder, having come here in 2008, to be back in their second NBA Finals, to maybe win their first NBA championship in franchise history since relocating. I mean, it's a momentous day.
I mean, how long do you get to claim the new frontier, by the way? I love Oklahoma, but it reminds me a lot of Lawton, where, they built a brand new Walmart when I was in the second grade, and we still to this day call it the new Walmart. It's been 20 years.
We're the 46th state.
Hey, 46 out of 50. We've had a few come our way. We got to act like we've been there before as a state, I think. But Joe, I agree with you wholeheartedly, except for the new frontier part. I think that when you look at this situation, like the Thunder and the team and the city and the state have never been here before, unless you really enjoyed watching the Lawton Fort Sill Cavalry hoist some trophies back in your day in the CBA. And it's really interesting, too, because I think that the NBA in large part hasn't been here. There's not very many teams who can stake their claim to what the Thunder might be able to pull off. Obviously, they still have to go win one more game. But if they're able to win this championship, this is a rare situation where the history of an organization spans back long enough for over 90% of their fan base to have a personal bond touch point with throughout every single chapter of this organization. The Celtics, for example. If you grew up a Celtics fan in the 2010s, the era of Bob Cousy and them boys, that is
about Sam Jones.
That is a generationally passed down story, right? That you didn't have any sort of resignation with, if you will. Whereas the Thunder are such a unique spot because everyone listening to this who's a diehard Thunder fan has lived and died with every single moment of the organization leading up to this championship if they're able to pull it off. So that presents another interesting element of it. Now, on the floor, who has the most to gain reputation-wise, legacy-wise, resume-wise with this win?
We're talking players here?
Anyone in the entire organization, from Matty T down.
Shout out Matty T. I think it's Sam Presti. And it's not like Sam Presti has anything left to prove. I mean, he is a world-class basketball executive. He's a genius. He's built 2 championship teams more than a decade apart. And he's the ultimate process over results guy. So then waiting until they get the result to say he's made it would be counterintuitive to everything he believes. But at the same time, when you look at his legacy, his resume, the only thing that's missing is an NBA title. And I think I wrote about this today for the Oklahoman. It would be like completion for him. Like there would be nothing else for him to achieve. Maybe he wants to stay on and try to see a dynasty through. But he did the hardest part. The hardest part's over. It was getting the Thunder back to this point, to a point where they were very early on in the organization. And this is a guy that was 29 years old in 2007 when the Supersonics hired him as their general manager. And then to get to the finals in 2012, to be back there in 2025, and to now maybe win it. He's going to go down as one of the best basketball GMs of all time, I think.
Yeah, you make a very compelling case, and I think that within that was a true reason why he's not exactly like, why you first go to players is because like Sam has done his job, right? Like whether they win one of these next 2 games or not, the job that Sam Presti and the position that Sam Presti holds is finalized, and it's clear he's built a team good enough to win a championship. Now the players have to go and actually win it one of these next 2 games for this to take place. So like it feels odd, like you mentioned, kind of putting this on the shoulders of Sam Presti when his impact on this, his stamp on this has already been felt. It was felt whenever you clinched the West. It was felt whenever you got back to being a playoff team, and it was felt whenever you got back to the point where you're winning 68 games and like having the best season in Thunder history. So I would say that Shea has the most immediate kind of gratification from a championship. Obviously, this is a lifetime dream for everybody on this roster, from Shea down to Adam Flagler. Like everybody dreams of being in that locker room for an NBA championship. But for Shea to have a clean sweep of like leading the league in scoring, regular season MVP, Western Conference MVP, Finals MVP, championship, and to do it in such a small market, to do it on your terms, to do it with the organization who believed in you to make the initial trade, but also like there were real questions. And you remember this show because you were the beat writer then, not the columnist. There were real questions of like, should the Thunder keep Shea on the ball? Should Josh Giddey be the point guard? Like, what should the Thunder do with Shea? Like the belief and the developmental story of Shea with this specific organization, whenever you see how he's grown, how once he got to a certain point, people then flipped the script and said, well, they're just wasting Shea. They're wasting Shea. They need to trade Shea. She needs to ask out like all these players do, to then winning it in this small market and having a runway here where you can have dynastic talks about this team. I just think puts everything with a nice pink bow on top of it. Like it's a well-wrapped present, and I think that Shea would be at the centerpiece, of course, of a potential finals win.
Yeah, I think Shea probably, behind Sam, I would think of him next. And, this isn't a team where it's not like this is their only chance. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's, about to be 27 years old. So he's got much of his career ahead of him. But if you think about it, there's only been a dozen plus guys to ever win MVP and an NBA title in the same year. I think about his legacy as far as comparing him to past Thunder greats. I mean, I used to always draw this line of distinction and still do, that Russell Westbrook is the greatest Thunder player in history. Kevin Durant was the best player to ever put on a Thunder uniform. I think Shea has a chance to overtake both of those guys just in what he means to the city, having taken them to a championship if they're to win this. He could retire after they win the title and he'd be an NBA Hall of Famer. I mean, Derrick Rose is the only MVP you question, is he a Hall of Famer? Obviously didn't win an NBA title. For Shea to win MVP and a title at this age, at the efficiency he's doing, I mean, he's really catapulting himself into a conversation that, would have sounded blasphemous a few years ago.
Yeah, and I think that it's if you look at this, it leads into Jalen Williams, who is my fourth. I'll tell you my third after the break, but my fourth is Jalen Williams, because if these two get it right now and they do finish this job, like they surpass, and to me they already have surpassed Kevin and Russ as a duo. Now, again, a duo, not viewing them through the prism of like who's the better individual player or who would you rank higher in all-time greats, but how do they complement one another? How do they help win you basketball games? These two play off of each other so much greater than Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant could play off of one another. And that speaks to the greatness of those two guys individually, to have a partnership where they didn't necessarily gel very well, but they still had massive success, to where if you guarantee that this team will have the 4 or 5 year runway here together, even in the midst of the nasty CBA stuff, like you're at least going to get that long. If they just even have a modicum of luck that team didn't have, like that team continued to run into injuries. They ran into those Golden State Warriors and blew that 3-1 lead. Like they ran into these problems that this team isn't foreseen to run into as of this moment, with knocking on wood and such, that winning a championship right out of the gate does change things. Because you look at the Boston Celtics, if they would have won that 2022 championship and then also won last year's championship, that core of Tatum and Brown is viewed so much differently right now than it is presently, even with the Tatum injury. And now you've kind of gotten your version of that 22 championship, and you still have room ahead of you to keep building on that if you can finish the job in Game 6 or Game 7 and win this series. So I think that J-Dub is in there as well.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Red flags coming out all over the place regarding Ace Bailey.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
My biggest fears, Keith, when it comes to Ace Bailey, or really any draft pick in any sport, is that they're not mentally in it. They have the highest ceiling in the world, but they don't have that dog in them, the killer mentality, the work ethic of, say, a Tyrese Maxey, and they don't reach their full potential, and you waste a third overall pick. How concerned are you, after talking to the people in the know, people with firsthand knowledge of the situation, how concerned are you about the future of the 76ers if they take Ace Bailey at 3?
You know, I'm not really concerned, but again, I do believe that it has to be the right situation. And I think you and I talked about this before. In order for him to succeed, I feel like the veteran leadership is going to have to step up. Now, I get it. The culture isn't the way it should be with Joel Embiid, you know, showing up late all the time. And you get an impressionable guy like Ace Bailey seeing that and thinking, okay, well, this is how the NBA is. However, when you have a guy like Tyrese Maxey, you know, Paul George, who's been raving over this guy for a while, and then if this is why I always said Kyle Lowry. And I get it. But if Kyle Lowry comes back and he can be the end of the bench type veteran guy, I think that those three guys can steer him the right way, right? So I'm not really concerned about that. Now, again, I'm not the one giving this guy, you know, $11 million a year to see how it goes. But at the same time, I just feel like that's where, and I get the culture issues, but that's where Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Kyle Lowry have to step up and lead them the right way.
You and I look at Kyle Lowry differently. I'm good to move on, but if you're telling me he can help, and you're right, there's no arguing this. He could absolutely help that culture in the locker room when it comes to letting the leaders lead and the veteran guys really take a guy like Ace Bailey under his wing. I have zero doubt about that. But if you're telling me that he can help bring along Ace Bailey to reach that full potential, that 5-year deal, he can play till he's 45. I don't care. Okay. However, when it comes to Ace Bailey, one of the things that really jumped out at me, two things really about your article, was you spoke to, I believe it was a Western Conference executive that said, oh, well, you still got to take him. You got to take him at 3. You just got to know what you're getting yourself into. And I'm like, well, right there is the problem. What am I getting myself into?
Yeah.
We've lived through, Keith, in recent history alone, we've lived through a guy like Ben Simmons who just looked disinterested at LSU. It was checking a box to be there more so than he really wanted to be there. And then we see him at the NBA level, and we never see that dog in him when it came to a last-second shot, improving his shooting, taking shots even, cowering in the biggest possible moment when we talk about that Game 7 past the Thibault that is famous now in South Philadelphia. So we've seen guys that have huge high ceilings and not reach them because of their lack of motivation or lack of work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to a guy like Ace Bailey, the Western Conference executive you talked about or talked to, simply put it in there, you got to know what you're getting into. What are they getting into with Ace Bailey?
That's a great question. They're getting into an immature guy, and I'm gonna read this to you. I was texting with another executive this morning, right? And I asked him, what would you do? And he says, I heard that the Sixers really want to take him. I mean, that the Sixers, will probably take him. He says, too skinny and immature for me. That's what he said, right? So what you're going to get is you're going to get a guy who needs to bulk up, and you're going to get an extremely immature player. And, talking to people that I spoke to, other executives, everybody talks about the immaturity. Everybody talks about how bad he was in the interviews. But they also said that comparable to all the other players, he probably had the least prep. And we talked about that yesterday. Right. It was one of those things where he went in there basically blind. Like, he just shows up for the interview, and it's like a kid taking a test and you didn't study at all the whole season. And everything's like a surprise to you. You don't know how to answer the question. So to me, that's what you're going to get, a guy who's extremely kind of sort of unpolished, a guy who has a very huge upside. But at the same time, he's silly, he's goofy, he's real fun loving. Like he's not like the guy said D head, but I changed it to butt head, right? Yes. He's not a D head, but at the same time, it's kind of like he's goofy. Like he needs to get a little bit more serious again. And that's why I'm saying that's where you need the strong leadership from. Right? You need that from those three guys we mentioned earlier, because he's immature and everybody knows that. But at the same time, he could be the best player in this draft if he hits on it.
See, and there's a worry for me, because if you have that potential about you and you don't realize it, that means you just that could very well mean that you're just happy with where you're at. Like, yeah, draft me at 3. This is really a 3-player draft. Everyone's saying a 2-player draft. Like, the immaturity, is it a matter of cockiness? Is it a matter of overconfidence? Is it a matter of thinking he's already reached his potential and can't get much better than what he already is? Is the immaturity an overconfidence? Is that the impression people are getting when it comes to what he could be in the NBA?
You know what? That's a great question, and I don't think it's that. I think what it is you can become a product of your environment, right? And I feel like, the guy was a little sheltered. They had as one guy told me, it was a bubble around him. And you look at it, when we talk about VJ Edgecombe, he goes to Long Island Lutheran. You talk about, you talk about Cooper Flagg. He went to Mount Verdi. You talk about Dylan Harper, he went to Don Bosco Prep. His father been in the league for 15 seasons. So all these guys, their base was they had better bases. They were basically put in positions to excel. Whereas, I hate to say it, it's kind of like it's the equivalent of a kid going to Westtown School, like a real ritzy private school for academics. But then you have a kid who goes to a school that's extremely underfunded, this and that, but both of them are trying to get into Harvard. Well, which one do you think is going to be more prepared, right? The other guy might be just as smart. I mean, might have, an IQ, but the other guy has a better base and he's been more prepared. So that's where I look at it. Like, it's just a product of what's been around him. and he keeps it real. This is what he knows. You know what I mean? So I don't really have a problem with that. It's just that I think that these other guys, Long Island Lutheran, Don Bosco Prep, right, Mount Verde Academy, these are like pretty good schools. And also
the pedigree. The pedigree's
there. Yeah, the pedigree. So you look at these guys and then, you look at, so I don't think it's a matter of being lazy. I think it's just what he knows right now. He hasn't been challenged, right? You go to Rutgers, Dylan Harper went there, but his father's a pro. He went, but you go to Rutgers and you're already the best guy on the team. Whereas you go to Duke, you got to fight. You have to fight just to keep those minutes up. So I just feel like he's maybe a little naive, inexperienced, but it's not like, hey, I have arrived. It's kind of like, did you play football, right? Did you ever play football? When your first day in pads, and it's so they go over there and tackle that dude. So you go over there and and they're like, nah, man, that ain't what you do. You got to hit the guy. So then you just hit him a little harder. And like, no, bro, you ain't gonna make it. So then next thing you know, they tell the guy to hit you and he knocks your head off. You're like, oh Lord. So then next thing you know, you're kind of like, well, man, I better get more aggressive. If not, I'm not going to make it. Well, I feel like that's what's going to happen to him. It's going to have to happen to him because all he knows is I'm the best thing out here. What I'm doing is good enough. I can laugh and joke. Nobody's going to say anything to me because they need me to play. That's what I take out of all this. Not that there's a cockiness or overconfidence that he's the guy. I feel like A, he's getting bad advice, and B, it's kind of like he was the big fish in a small pond.
The NBA playoffs are almost over. In fact, they could end this very evening. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action while you still have a chance. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals and assists. There's so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. You can place that first $5 bet on some NFL playoff dark horses. The Carolina Panthers sit at plus 240 to reach the postseason. The Bears plus 190 and the new-look Raiders plus 320. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
Cornerback CJ Bronaugh has committed to the Florida Gators after decommitting from Nebraska. And after he decommitted, he said, he was down to Florida State. That was yesterday that he decommitted pretty quickly. A lot of people thought that he would be a Florida Gator commit. And CJ Bronaugh, just insane speed, right? Hence the beginning of this, which is one of the very few times you will ever hear me sing, rap, or any equivalent on this show. But CJ Bronaugh committed to the Florida Gators. And so I know that I see people in the chat talking about the track time because he is an insane athlete. He's a great track runner, track athlete. And Aiden Mizell is kind of, the resident Florida Gators track star. And he ran a 100-meter time of 10.65. Okay? He ran a 100-meter of 10.65. He ran a 200 of 23.75. Okay? CJ Bronaugh ran a 100-meter of 10.24 and a 200, 20.87. So significantly, or we'll say considerably faster there. CJ Bronaugh is just a freak athlete. And the Florida Gators under Billy Napier have pretty consistently stuck with some I like to call them guardrails. And I know that there are NFL teams that call them guardrails. I don't necessarily know if that's what college teams are going to call them, but guardrails. And for Florida, it's never been secretive, right? They like guys that play multiple sports, whether that's, football and track or football and basketball, football, baseball, whatever it may be. They like guys that play multiple sports. They like guys that have verified height, weight, length, speed. They've talked about that all the time. And CJ Bronaugh has all that. I mean, 6'1", arms look long as hell. I would say he's got like a 6'4" wingspan, if not a bit more. His arms just look insanely long. But 6'1", that kind of track speed joining the team. And look, I know that there's like wind aided and whatnot. I don't give a damn if you're wind aided or not. You're running fast as hell if you have those times. So love that. CJ Bronaugh is just a great athlete in the secondary. Florida Gators add another blue chip player to their 2026 recruiting class. He's a 4-star on all sites, on all services. On On3, he is the 138th ranked player nationally. This is not the consensus. This is just the site itself. On On3, he's a 138th player nationally, 19th cornerback in the country, 20th player in the state of Florida. On 24/7, he is the 72nd ranked player, the highest he's ranked or the best he's ranked, 72nd ranked player, 6th corner, 8th player in the state of Florida. On ESPN, he is the 215th ranked player, which is his worst rating, 20th corner in the country, 33rd player in the state of Florida. Also interesting to note, which I just like noting these things about places where he is 90 spots lower nationally on ESPN than he is on On3, but he's only one corner spot behind. So that's just, again, an interesting thing there. On Rivals, he is a 4-star, 94th ranked player nationally, 10th corner in the country, 12th player in the state of Florida. Florida just added a speed demon at corner, right? Was committed to Nebraska for a bit. I will also say this before we continue talking about the recruitment. Was scheduled to take a visit to Penn State. What's up, CAG? Was scheduled to take a visit to Penn State this weekend officially. That got canceled before the commitment. So that got canceled already. He is not taking that commitment. Took official visits to Florida in late May. Then took an official visit to Nebraska. This is all while he was committed to Nebraska. So took a visit to Florida in late May. Took a visit to Nebraska in the first week of June. Took a visit to Florida State this past weekend. So I already saw the people on Twitter trying to spin it and be like, oh, he wasn't a take. We weren't getting. Was on an official this past weekend. And again, was supposed to take an official visit to Penn State this coming weekend. And that got canceled before this commitment even got announced. Initially, we were told to expect the commitment at 6 Eastern, and then he tweeted, or posted on Instagram that it was getting pushed back a little bit, which is fine, happens all the time. But this is one of those recruitments where it seems like the kid commits to a school, and then all his visits that were pending gets canceled. And who's to say if it actually gets rescheduled or not? I've said that my take on recruiting this year has kind of just been that kids, when they have visits set up but they commit somewhere, they cancel those visits. And if they reschedule those visits, then they reschedule the visits. But it does seem like nationwide, a lot of kids are committing, then temporarily canceling their officials and unofficials. So just canceling all their visits. And then if they reschedule them, they reschedule them. But schools are pushing more to say, hey, stay committed to us without the visits elsewhere. Because, you get on campus for a visit and then just, to be honest, get on campus for a visit. They start talking dollar figures there, and then it gets messy, right? And then you can lead into a bidding war and stuff like that. So I think schools are kind of like, hey, we'll figure this out. We'll get you to not take those other visits to Florida or to other schools.